Well, dear God, thank you to meet in your house and study your word, Lord. We ask that we're truly able to apply what we learned tonight to our lives, that there's just some tidbit that we can grab to hold on, some truth from your word that is applicable to our lives as we go out into the world and do our best to live up to your mission that you gave us and be a light in the world for you. We pray this all in your son's name. Amen. Amen. All right. 1 Kings chapter 19 is where we're at tonight, but I figure it might be nice to just kind of do a little recap before we get going. And that's where you come in, right, Kathy? No. No? All right. I'm picking on you tonight. Billy, you got the night off. Thanks for the free tacos. In all truthfulness, I was saying this to Bill beforehand, but we're down here because I wanted to sit down tonight. I didn't feel like walking around. My first cross-country practice of the year, I'm coaching the middle school team this year. And there's two of us coaching. And one coach, he said, we need to be on either side of the team. And he wanted to be on the slow side of the team, which meant I had to be with the fast guys up front. And I'm not as fast as I thought I was. That kid, there's one kid that was very fast. He'll be on that varsity team soon enough. Man.
Is this going to work? You sitting down?
That works always. So.
Right, I'll be on camera all night tonight.
Okay.
I'll be walking around. All right. Well, as far as review is concerned, 1 Kings. Let's go all the way back to the start. What does this book look like? What is this book about? What are some of the things that have been happening? Any recollection?
It starts with David.
Right. So we go all the way back to King David and the line of King David, and that's a lot of what we see is King David's line to start the book, right? But some things start to go south. King David does a pretty good job for the most part, right? He had his faults, but then we get another king after him who does all right, and then not quite as well. What king was that? Solomon. What was Solomon's big task?
Build the temple.
Build the temple. Was he successful? Yeah. He built a pretty nice temple, actually. Solomon, does he remain faithful? What happened?
Well, he started marrying wives from outside the faith, and they brought in their own gods, and pretty soon was following their gods and worshiping them.
Mm-hmm.
That was really his downfall.
Right, and just a textbook example, well, maybe beyond a textbook example, there's many textbook examples there from Solomon's life about why, as Christians, if we ever are in the dating scene, you don't want to date a non-believer because you don't want to be unequally yoked as you get into marriage. Because a lot of times, there's kids that would always ask us at Concordia, and a lot of times it was girls, and they would say, "Is it okay to date a guy who is a non-believer?" And they would have the thought that because I'll eventually change him. And maybe sometimes they did, but a lot of times, we don't see the person being brought up. We see the other person being brought down. So, and that was definitely the case with Solomon. He had 300 women that could bring him down. That was the problem there. And so he starts allowing other gods to be worshipped in Israel. And because of that, the God says he's going to turn away from Solomon's family. And how quickly does that happen after Solomon passes? After he goes to rest in the halls of his fathers. That's what they always say. 5 years, right? And we're talking in the span of this story, that is immediately, right? Because within 5 years, the temple that Solomon spent so much time on is getting ransacked, taken over. And we see one of the major events in the history of Israel happened there. What is it? What's just a few short years after Solomon's son takes over? What happens to Israel?
The kingdom is divided.
Yeah, it gets divided into, and we get the northern kingdom, which we call Israel. They get the name Israel for some reason, right? And then the southern kingdom, Judah, right? And so that's all of a sudden things get confusing because we're talking about two different sets of kings throughout the rest of First Kings. They're saying the king of Israel and the king of Judah. And the king of Judah is Solomon's line, David's line. And the king of Israel, to start, is Jeroboam's line. And then it switches again and again and again because the king of Israel is never faithful. It's just never happens. It's bad king after bad king after bad king. And I think when Pastor Taylor was here, he kind of gave you the count, right? On good kings versus bad kings. And
one thing he said was, he had 800 porcupines. He had a child's sermon.
Yeah. Okay.
And he had
So he
the
said,
child
like
said 300 wives and 800 porcupines.
Yeah. Keeping it clean. All right. That does sound like Pastor Taylor. So, as we get into this line of kings, right? It's sometimes the king of Judah is good, sometimes bad, and the king of Israel always bad. And this is a cycle that keeps on repeating itself, and eventually we get someone new that just kind of appears in the story. There's no real backstory. It's just all of a sudden he's there. Who showed up last week? You remember? He's here this week too. Ahab was there last week, and he's there this week. I'm thinking someone more important than Ahab.
Elijah.
Oh,
Elijah, yeah. Yep. The prophet Elijah. He just shows up, and we get kind of like I said, when we talk about the book of First Kings, maybe if you know any story, remember any story from Sunday school, you probably remember the one we went through last week, which was Elijah versus the prophets of Baal. Yeah. And so we've got this big scene on Mount Carmel where Elijah and the prophets of Baal are both trying to light their sacrifice on fire without doing anything on their own, with just the help of God, right? Or of Baal, if you're the prophets of Baal. And what happened?
Baal can't do it.
Yeah, right. And Elijah gave him every advantage. Yeah. They let him choose theirs. There's 450 prophets of Baal, right, versus one prophet of God. And these prophets of Baal, they cried out morning and noon, and it said all kinds of stuff, right? They were cutting themselves and just all kinds of weird things. And do you remember Elijah? Some of the things, he kind of, one of my favorite lines in scripture, he mocks them, and
they had water on everything. He was going to burn them. Soaked it down, dug a ditch, and that to hold the water in it.
And then with his own sacrifice, he gave it every disadvantage that he could. And God, of course, takes care of it. And Baal, right? If he was real, he should have been able to take care of it. He's the god of weather, and so it should have been pretty easy for him to, strike it with lightning and let the sacrifice of fire. But obviously, he's not real, so it did him no good. And of course, after all of Israel's, because it says all of Israel gathered together to see this scene, of course, after that, what they're going to come right back to the faith, right?
No.
Imagine that, and that's kind of where we pick up today. We've got Elijah, and he's maybe thinking that everyone's going to come back into the fold, and it just doesn't work out that way. And you can't understand why they could see something like that and then not necessarily come back to the faith, or try to say, oh, maybe we imagined that, or I don't know how they justified it. But that's where we're going to pick up today. We're on chapter 19. Can someone read for me verses 1 through 3, please?
Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done, and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life when he came to Beersheba in Judah. He left his servants there.
All right. What do you think about that? Jezebel, right? So Jezebel is Ahab's wife. What do you think about her reaction to this? I find it, how would you have reacted if you were Jezebel?
Mighty, and boy, what I say is gonna go,
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Typical woman.
Easy now.
They're
Are we
right.
outnumbered?
I'll give you a ride home.
Well, she has a pretty strong reaction, right? She had put a lot of stock in Baal, right? It said that his prophets and the prophets of Baal would do what? They would eat at Jezebel's table. Yeah, that's how much she valued. They got to eat at the queen's table at mealtime, right? What I find surprising, I guess, is that Jezebel heard about this scene, right? She said, "Oh, well, the prophets of Baal failed, and Yahweh, Elijah's God, didn't set everything on fire in this miraculous sign." And her first thought isn't to say, maybe I was wrong about Baal. Her first thought is to what?
Eliminate Elijah.
Right? And she gives a pretty strong proclamation there. What does she say? She says, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them," referring to the 450 prophets of Baal that had met their demise, right? What do you think about Elijah's response to this?
He was afraid,
Oh, it's that, right? Elijah was afraid. Yeah.
and his faith starting to lose a little bit, I guess.
It's interesting that this guy
It is, because what he's seen there, or what he did, and then being afraid.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you think about this guy that he'd been so courageous in many ways throughout his life. You think about the fact that he did, in a certain sense, stand alone with God, right? He had a lot of faith to do it against all those people. He had gone to King Ahab. Think about how Elijah's ministry starts, right? He goes and tells King Ahab what? Does anyone remember? Goes to the king's face and says, "Just so you know, I've been praying, and here's what I've been praying for. A drought,
Lack of rain,
right? And a famine, and it's going to happen for the next
3 years.
It's to end up being 3.5 years." Yeah, so that's quite the chit chat to have with the king there. Yeah, lot of courage. And now Jezebel says, "I'm going to take care of you," and Elijah kind of turns tail, and it says that he ran for his life. You think it was? I asked the question there. Do you think it was sinful for him to run in this situation? Anyone going out on a limb?
Yes,
You do?
semi-sinful.
As a small sin, yeah. Wasn't too. Yeah.
I mean, it's a lack of faith is what it is, and that's sinful.
And
look at the faith he had too. I mean, so.
It's tough, right? We go through all these stories, and I always love this. And Pastor Clark pointed this out maybe a month or so ago. In Hebrews chapter 11, they call it the Hall of Faith. Yeah, kind of these great people of the faith, and you looked at their stories, some of them, and you're like, wow, this person, this is what they're saying. This is the top. This person had as good a faith as you can imagine, and they were still sinful at times and still lack faith at times. And so sometimes it's almost a little encouraging to remember, as you read through these stories about the great prophets, that even Elijah, maybe struggled a little bit with faith at times. Now, as far as saying this is sinful, I guess I don't know. The commentaries I read on it were pretty divided. Some of them said, it might have been God's prompting for him to leave, right? But some of them said, this is definitely, Elijah, how could you, after all you've been through, to doubt that God would protect you from this, right?
Well, that'd be Satan working on him, casting doubt that, God ain't gonna protect you for this one.
And
I would say it's pretty much Satan working.
And honestly, I look at this and I think maybe it was an empty threat from Jezebel, because it certainly was a poor strategy. If she really wanted to kill Elijah, you don't say, hey, tomorrow I'm going to be coming by to kill you. You say, you would, yeah, right? I can't imagine a scenario where you kind of make the announcement that, hey, this is what I'm planning on doing. Be prepared for in that scenario. So
I mean, were David and Solomon, they were sinful.
Oh,
I mean, look at the.
Holy cow!
I mean, what they had, the beliefs in Christ and for God.
Right. David was very sinful, and it says that in many respects, right, he was a man after God's own heart.
Yeah.
Now Solomon, honestly, you get done reading that story about Solomon, you say, I don't know where he is right now. You hate to say it, but you can't. I wouldn't be confident saying. We don't know how. Maybe right at the end of his life he kind of repented and turned his ways, but I don't know. I wouldn't say for sure he's in heaven. Yeah, but what do I know? All right, let's move along here. Verse 4. How about verse 4? Can someone read that for me?
While he himself went a day's journey into the desert, he came to a broom tree, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors.
Oof. Kind of a dark turn here. Right? And you think of, once again, let's just think about some of the things that Elijah has been through, in his prayer life, right? This is a guy that prayed, and 3.5 years it didn't rain. He had that kind of connection with God, pretty intimate. Why is he so depressed? I think I asked that question there. Why is he so depressed?
Well, for one thing, he felt like he was all alone in the world. I mean, he thought, there's nobody on my side. No matter what I do, I'm still all alone.
That's a theme that's going to repeat itself several times, right? Coming up here. You did your reading, yeah. And that a lot, he does. He feels very much so all alone.
And his work is fruitless.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, right? Not only does he feel isolated, and I think that's one of the big things that Satan wants to do to us, right? He wants us to feel alone and isolated. There's no one with us in this journey. Yeah. It wasn't just isolation, but he's saying, I did all of this, right? And
look what it got me.
We just had a sign of 3.5 years of drought, and then we did this kind of competition at Mount Carmel, and God showed his power, and then right after that was done, what happened? Right? It rains, just after this whole thing happens. And so the people have to get it, but they don't. They just don't get it. And so I would certainly say, he was probably depressed because of that isolation, and just he's feeling like I put in all this work and I'm not seeing any fruit from it. What is his prayer there? What does he say in that prayer?
I've had enough.
Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors.
Oh, man.
And I'm a sinner just like everybody else.
Yeah. And I think I asked the question, any irony in that prayer? See if anyone catches it. I just never know if irony is exactly the right word to use for this, but we'll see.
Well, his ancestors kind of did the same thing as what he did here.
Kind of, right? Elijah certainly remained more faithful for
longer period.
But we don't know. It doesn't give us much information on. Maybe he's just talking about Israel as a whole, but that's not quite where I was going, though. How does Elijah's life end? Anyone know?
Taken to heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Because I hope all of our lives end with us getting taken to heaven.
No,
A little
but
more specific,
Cherry came down and picked him up and wham, he's gone.
right? What did Elijah never do?
Every
He never died, right? And so his prayer about, yeah, just take my life now. I want to die, right? And it was such a strange prayer to have in scripture. And then this is the guy that he never died. So God did not answer that prayer, right? Thankfully.
How many other people went straight to heaven without dying?
Yeah, you're always putting me to the test.
No.
yeah.
No, I just, are there any you think of? Or?
Let me put a pin in that. Let me write that down. I think the number is 4, but I think I'm guessing. Yeah, let's see if I can. I'm on tape, and I don't want to give the wrong answer. Then I can't say he must be misremembering the situation there. So, we got you on tape giving the wrong answer. What did I say last week? I said, oh no, I'm just a student, so I can say that.
No, but I think you looked it up too, Chris, and it was 3 or something.
No.
No.
All right. 4.
4.
Hopefully. It seems like you ever get that where you know something but you don't know why, and it's just in your head somewhere, and I'm hoping that's one of these situations. I will look that up.
Boy, you better.
No.
Gary's working on it.
Tough crowd, huh? Gary's working on it.
Yeah.
Keep it down if I'm wrong. We need to talk after class.
Yeah.
We are looking at verses 5 through 8. Can someone read 5 through 8 for me?
Then he lay down under the tree and fell asleep. All at once, an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was a cake of bread, baked over hot coals, and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." Ate also. So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God.
All right, thank you. All right. So Elijah has maybe it's a dream of sorts, right? He says he fell asleep. And what happens?
He woke up again and the angel was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Something to eat.
He had some more to eat.
right? Kind of a strange divine miracle there, right? Just a meal for Elijah. And I think I asked the question there, what can we learn from God's treatment of Elijah? What do you think of God's treatment of Elijah in these verses?
He had a job for him to do.
All right. And that's coming, right? He's got a task for Elijah.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that actually in a few questions, I think, about the idea of why it's good to have a task.
And he's always going to take care of it.
Sure. Yeah. He provided for
he
Elijah.
Never lets us down.
Mm-hmm. Sure. How was God merciful to Elijah?
Protected him probably because, everybody is after him to kill him,
Oh, yeah. At least quite a few people are. Yeah.
Not everyone.
I think a lot of people wanted to see him dead, I'm sure. This is the guy that maybe they blame him for that 3.5-year drought and famine. And certainly if you're on Jezebel's side, you wanted to see him gone. Okay.
There's a lot of farmers after him too, I think.
He ruined the agricultural industry there. What do you think about the idea of God taking care of Elijah's physical needs first?
Well, he woke up and there was cakes out there and water, were freshly baked, and that for him. So just like God did in Exodus, kept providing for him.
Oh, keep that in mind. There's going to be another callback to Exodus here.
Yeah,
But before he said, before God is, because it's going to happen, there's going to be an idea after the meal, right? he says, where you got to eat this meal because and you've got a task at hand, right?
A long journey yet.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be something else that comes where God takes care of Elijah's, maybe we'll call it emotional needs. But he takes care of the physical needs first. What do you think about that?
So that he's strengthened.
Mm-hmm.
Did he keep giving them food for those 40 days or must have?
You
40
can
days, 40
say he was provided for in some way, right? But the food, the initial food is what strengthened him for that 40-day journey. I think it was just yesterday that I was teaching Pat. And I talked about how in our education classes, we found I had to walk through how to teach, essentially. And I don't know how much I learned, but I do remember them comparing some of the modern techniques that we've learned to, and I went back and I looked and got to compare them to how Jesus taught.
Yeah. And
it turns out that Jesus was doing this stuff all along, all this stuff that they did studies on in textbooks and very, look at how we had to come to all these modern conclusions to reach this. And then you just looked at the way Jesus taught and you're like, whoa, he did all of those things. So imagine that the Son of God was a very good teacher, right? He knew what he was doing. And what we see here is something similar. It's not teaching, but something that we might not have come across until modern times. And in psychology, we call it, it's a fancy term here. It's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Anyone ever heard that before?
Oh, yeah.
No, I knew it. Shocking.
No, I haven't heard.
So what is the term? What does hierarchy mean?
Way up there, king probably. Or...
Right. So if you're at the top of a hierarchy, you're the king. If it's a kingdom, right? And whereas if you're at the bottom of the hierarchy, maybe you're a peasant, or something like that. So it's a lot of times the hierarchy looks like this. As you get towards the top, there's less people. There's a lot of lower class, and as you get towards the top, maybe right. Well, Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that you got to take care of these needs down here before the person is even willing to think about taking care of these needs up here and these needs up here and these needs up here. And the bottom needs, the most base needs that a person needs to take care of are, what do you think? Food.
Food and water.
Water. What do you think's next? You got the bottom two. What comes next?
Or your spirit, I would say, one.
Spirit's up here. Spiritual needs. A lot of people won't be able to focus on their spiritual needs until
Food or housing, then?
shelter, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of the idea behind. But so Elijah here, he was able to take care. God took care of his physical needs, right? And then he was able to focus on those spiritual needs. It's a lot tougher to focus on them if your physical needs aren't met. And that's a lot of the idea behind the mission work we do, right? Yeah. It's if we are able to take care of someone's physical needs, there's a lot higher chance that they're going to be able to then listen to us as we talk about Jesus, right? And not only that, that shows them that we care and that that we love them. But even back then, this modern principle God was doing this for Elijah. He was taking care of his physical needs, so that he could then, and he does it right in the order that a modern scientist would say you should do it, and then he takes care of his spiritual needs. And he actually goes further than that. Elijah, how long does it say he's gone? Bill? 8 days, or chapter 8, or verse 8? You were talking about
40 days and 40 nights.
Remind you of anything?
Yeah.
Moses on Mount Sinai and Jesus in the desert.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, it should remind you of the Exodus journey in general.
40 years.
Mm-hmm. How long do you think it? Anyway, maybe someone's Bible has the note. Now, Bill, you don't have your Bible out tonight, huh? Got the phone Bible. No wonder I haven't seen the hand go up in the air as much tonight. Usually he's back there and just knows all the answers.
40 days and 40 nights.
Right. That if he had made a trip straight from where he had been at the time to the destination that he ended up, it would only taken about 10 days.
Okay.
but it took him 40. Sound like anybody?
Well, Christ was 40 days in the desert.
Okay. Sound, anybody
Israelites
else?
was 40 years and
Someone not making a straightforward journey,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
How long do you think? Like, you ever look at the map and see where the Israelites went from Egypt to the Promised Land, and you're like, it's like, yeah.
They were back and forth.
I think they should have been able to do that in like a couple months. Yeah. But they spent all that time just wandering around because, and so certainly there's a callback here. Elijah might have just had a spiritual failure of sorts, and it took him to get back on track here.
What was God's reason for having him 40 years, in the desert?
It was self-inflicted.
disobedient.
God didn't want to have
No.
that happen. Yeah.
But it was themselves that caused this?
Yeah, it was their disobedience. It was not God's plan.
No, because I mean, they sinned,
Mm-hmm.
and that was their punishment. 40 years.
Yeah, and what needed to happen was their sin was so bad that they were told that there's a generation that wasn't going to get to be in the Promised Land, and so they spent 40 years wandering around, and that generation passed.
And they grumbled.
Yeah, there's a lot of grats. That word seems to come up a lot.
Even Moses, look what happened to him,
Yeah, he got to see it, but he didn't.
Yeah,
he
he
didn't
looked
quite make
across
it
the
in,
river.
right? So, yeah, and that's a callback to the idea that we were talking about just a few minutes ago with some of the people that we see that are the great heroes of the faith, and even they, stumbled. No, 9 and 10. Can someone read those for me?
There he went into a cave and spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to him. What are you doing here, Elijah? He replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, broken down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too.
Okay. So his physical needs are taken care of, but does it sound like Elijah's and the proclaim God's word to people?
No, he scared himself.
That'd be pretty, you hate to say so, but like if a pastor was talking like this before a service, you'd be like, I'm kind of worried about what kind of sermon they're about to give, right? And you should be, right? You don't want your spiritual leader to be in that kind of place emotionally. It's very tough to feed others, right? When you yourself need to be fed. And that seems that Elijah needed to be fed in more than just a physical manner here, right? Was there anything wrong with some of the words that he said there? Is there anything inaccurate in his statement? I don't remember. It's just a little bit before this. We see, so Elijah says, what does he think about, is there any other followers of God around?
He's saying that he's the only one left,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
but he had left his servant elsewhere before he came.
It was not quite that. But is he the only one that's left?
No.
We learned just before, and this was in last week's reading, and I'm kicking myself for not writing down the verse, but we learned that there was 7,000 other people that God refers to. He said, oh, there's 7,000 that have remained faithful. He tells Elijah that, but Elijah still says, I'm the only one. I'm the only one that's left. That's not accurate, right? But what does it reflect? That reflects how Elijah feels right now. He probably does feel like he's the only one left, right? And in discouraging times like this, I think a lot of people that serve God, maybe in a church, right, today, we'll make a modern day application here. They might feel like I'm the only one that's taking this stuff seriously.
Chapter 18:22.
Thank you, Kathy. Chapter 18:22 says, then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Where did you see There's a 7,000 somewhere in here. Love Gary looking up everything back there. Yeah. Write it down. I know I'm right on this one. Not sure on the 4, but the 7,000. Maybe it was chapter 17. It was in last week's reading. But there are 7,000, and Elijah keeps on repeating this, right? This inaccuracy. I'm the only one that's left. I'm the only. But that's probably how he felt, and maybe I don't know. Maybe someone in here has been able to relate to that at some point in their lives. You know, this feeling of isolation.
I mean, look at David, the fear he had. And, there was some, or Saul, or, they were always out to kill him,
Mm-hmm.
He was hiding in the caves, and he was feared for his life all the time, too.
Mm-hmm.
And his faith should have been as strong as anyone,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Elijah, he's had very, very close encounters with God, very personal relationship. And it doesn't get much more a personal relationship with God than what you're about to get right here in the next few verses. Can someone read 11 through 12 for me? Or 11 and 12, I should say.
The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper.
That's good right there. All right. Kind of a unique story here. What
Is this a vision, or this
is
really
happening? This is happening.
I mean, this is happening.
Yep. What did Elijah need to lift his spirits?
Knowing that God would be with him always.
Something like that, right?
And the power of God and what he can do,
Mm-hmm. And I would say it was even simpler than that. He just needed a personal encounter with God, right? He needed a personal time with God. And he's getting much more of a personal time with God than maybe you would think of as you do your morning reading or something like that. But he needed a personal encounter with God, and holy cow, does he get it here, right? What do you think of these big things that are happening here? You think with this earthquake and this huge wind that's tearing the mountain apart, and
Christ died, in the earthquake, and people.
There is certainly big signs when Christ died. Yeah.
Well, here I think it's God is saying, "See, I can still do these things." It's kind of to rebuild his faith by showing him that I haven't lost any power. I mean, I can still do it.
We can certainly see God's power through all this, right?
Right.
I like that. And that's actually not the angle I was taking, but I do like it. That's good. Where was God? Did we get to it?
In the gentle whisper.
Yeah.
Great. What do you think about that?
Well, it shows God wasn't angry with him, I guess. I mean, it's saying, he was angry. He'd probably been in a loud voice or something, But here, a gentle whisper, it's kind of a calming effect, a whisper like that.
Yeah. How would you have expected God to show up? How would you expect God to show up in a situation like this? He's the Almighty God.
Screaming and hollering and
Screaming and hollering. All right. Big signs, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. At least a trumpet or something. Come on, man.
Yeah,
right?
That's true. Yeah.
And that's what people would expect, right? They'd expect God to show up in a big way. I'm going to have a personal encounter with God. It's going to be, huge. But that's not what happened, right? God showed up in a small way, small but powerful, right?
And that shows his love too.
Mhm.
You know, besides the power, he can show love with it with a gentle, tender voice.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Maybe someone in here's done this. Maybe I've done it. But have you ever missed God working in your life because you expected it to be in a big way, and it was in a little way that you might not have noticed at the time?
Yeah.
I don't know. I saw this was a perfect kind of case in point here that you know, I think we all, whenever we're praying for something maybe or whatnot, we want God to take care of an issue in our life. We expect, you know, I'm waiting for him to come in and this big solution and this big sign. And that's not always the way that God works. And I think a lot of times we miss that God did, you know, oh, he was working through this situation when we look back in retrospect.
I've seen that many times where I've learned that I don't set the expectations. I just put it into his hands, and
Right?
because there's been things that I prayed about and kind of envisioned in my own head, you know, what I'm looking for, and yet I'll see that he answered my prayers, and I look and I go, his way was even better.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
I think a lot of times we try to do that, Bill. We try to put a box around God and say, this is the way God works. Yeah. He works through the earthquakes and moving mountains and that's just not what happens in the story at all here. Yeah.
Elijah was already feeling mighty low. Maybe the gentle whisper is what he needed.
Yeah, right. God would know. Yeah. So I just thought this was a really cool little story here. Verses 13 through 15. Let's maybe skip that. Did we answer that question? Why might God have revealed himself to Elijah? Right? He needed uplifting. And I think we talked, what can we learn from this encounter? God works in small ways. I hope you already knew that, but he doesn't just work in the big ways. He works in small ways. 13 through 15. Can someone read that for me?
When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, broken down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." The Lord said to him, "Go back the way you came and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram." Further, I think I went to 16.
Yeah, I did kind of cut you off in the middle there. Well, that's good for now. I'm gonna still talk anyway. All right. So we've got kind of a repetition of the conversation almost. You know, Elijah says some of the same thing here again. But first he's gonna, he pulled his cloak over his face, and even though it was just a whisper, right? He's still having an encounter with God, and so probably some most definitely some fear, right? And the hiding of the face, and he's probably awe-stricken and just full of reverence and whatnot. And what does God tell Elijah? What does he say to him?
Go back the way you came.
All right, yeah. Time to get back to reality there. What else does he tell him?
Well, he's to go and anoint Hazael,
Hey.
king of Aram.
And if I would have let Richard read another verse, he would have told him that that he's also to anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel, and anoint Elisha. Right? It couldn't be more confusing, but Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel, Mahola, to succeed you as prophet, right? So it gives him a task to do. Did I ask you a question there about tasks, doing jobs? I think I did. I think something along the lines of why might it have been nice for Elisha, Elisha, to have Elijah. We'll emphasize the J for now. Elijah to have a job.
give him a purpose to go on. You know, it's
Right?
kind of like the reason I get up in the morning, there's a purpose, I got something to do.
Gives them something to strive towards, right? And that can change an attitude pretty quick. Right? You think about, and maybe even a little darker, you think about someone that's grieving, and sometimes what do you say, what's one of the best things you can do for them is, other than listen, is just keep them busy. Yeah. But it's not just that. I think there's a lot of applications here. The word we would use for our purposes, we don't want to remain idle. IDLE, idle. What does that imply? Doing nothing, right? Yeah, idle. You think about a car, right? If you're just idling, you're just sitting at the light.
That 7,000 is coming up in the next passage too.
Is it? I told you I was right. Well, that's good. I'm glad I wasn't making that one up.
The old saying, that idle hands are the devil's workshop. So if you haven't got something to do, that gives Satan a better chance to get at you and work in your head,
2 Thessalonians.
Change your ways.
Yeah.
I'll turn there. You don't have to turn there unless you want to. Sure, you can turn there if you want to. 2 Thessalonians 3, 6 through 15. Glad we aren't doing a Bible race right now. It's looking kind of bleak. All right, so just before our pastoral epistles, an easy one to miss. All right. Yeah, look at the header of that section there. It says warnings against idleness. IDLE. Says, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, we command you, brothers, to keep away from every brother who is idle and does not live according to the teaching you received from us. For you yourselves know how you ought to follow our example. We were not idle when we were with you, nor did we eat anyone's food without paying for it. On the contrary, we're night and day laboring and toiling so that we would not be a burden to any of you. We do this not because we do not have the right to such help, but in order to make ourselves a model for you to follow. For even when we were with you, we gave you this rule: if a man will not work, and he shall not eat. All right, and they can keep on going, and we can talk about it. But what Bill's application was, and it's a really good one when it comes to idleness, is that you say idleness is the devil's playground. Is that what you?
Devil's
Workshop.
Yeah.
Okay, I suppose you could say playground too, right?
Yeah.
And the idea behind that is if you're doing nothing, if you're not occupied with something, you're probably more likely to find yourself doing something sinful, to keep yourself busy. And so certainly there's application to us, and maybe that's not what was going on with Elisha, but he certainly, it would have been nice. It's nice for him to be busy again here. And he's given this kind of neat little task to appoint a king and appoint, we could use the word successor, Elisha. Can someone read 16 through 18 for me? Or just 17 and 18? I already read 16. Again, not easy.
Jehu will put to death any who escaped the sword of Hazael, and Elijah will put to death any who escaped the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees who have not bowed down to Baal, and all whose mouths have not kissed him.
All right, you're right. There's our 7,000. I've been waiting for those guys to show up. So he's anointing a king. He's anointing a successor. Anything encouraging here? Yeah, this whole thing is gonna. If we look at it, it should be to lift Elijah's, with the J, his spirit. What encouragements might he have taken away from this passage? What was his complaint to God?
That he was the only one.
I'm alone, right? That's so cool. So you're gonna look as God's gonna answer every one of his complaints very directly, right? I'm alone. And what encouraging thing happens to Elijah? Finds out he's not going to be alone, right?
Yeah.
right? And so he's going to have someone to be a friend.
Yeah, he's going to anoint some people.
Someone to be a successor.
Yeah, someone to be a successor.
He's worried about the future of Israel, right? No one's turning to him, but he's saying, God's saying, I'm still going to be doing work. You know, it's just not going to be through. It's going to be through other people. So everything's going to go on here. So Elijah's got a friend and successor in line. He's got someone that's going to succeed a corrupt king and a very corrupt queen, right? Does anyone remember what the description was in 1 Kings of Ahab?
The most wicked.
Yeah, there you don't mince words. They say basically there's been some bad kings,
but this is the worst.
This one's the worst. This one's the most wicked king there had been up to this point. And if you read through Ahab's life, he does some pretty bad stuff, and he's got some pretty bad stuff to go still here in chapter 20 and 21, which more than likely we won't be making it to. But all right, so Elijah, he certainly could have taken some encouragements from this lesson. You know, he wasn't alone, and we get that reminder again, right? That there's 7,000. He'd heard it before. He needed to hear it again. You're not alone. You're not alone. Right? 19 through 21. Talking the call of Elisha. Can someone read 19 through 21 for me?
So Elijah went from there and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat. He was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen, and he himself was driving the 12th pair. Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak around him. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. "Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye," he said, "and then I will come with you." "Go back," Elijah replied. "What I have done to you." So Elisha left him and went back. He took his yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He burned the plowing equipment to cook the meat and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out to follow Elijah and became his attendant.
All right.
Those people he fed, are those the ones that were following Elijah?
They were.
I mean, he fed the people.
Yeah, I mean, they were associated with Elisha in some way.
Yeah.
I hope that there were some of them.
There were probably some of the 7,000.
I would imagine so. If Elisha is amongst them, you know, we tend to associate with people that are like-minded.
Yeah.
All right. So Elijah. We'll just really emphasize it for right now. He listens to that small voice from God, right, and of God, and kind of in a little bit of a reverse order here. He goes and gets Elisha first, and he does. What does he do? He throws his cloak on him, which would have been a sign that he wanted him to be his student, his successor. And how does Elisha react to that? Right?
Is that kind of like, boy, am I putting you in a hot box? Huh?
Could be. It's kind of a tough little one to figure out what exactly he's saying there in verse, was that verse 20? Go back, Elijah replied, "What have I done to you? What have I done to you?" Right? And a lot of commentators say maybe he's saying, "Oh, it's not me that's calling you. You know, what have I done to you?"
Okay.
It's God that's calling you. And Elisha is certainly pretty committed to this calling. He responds pretty drastically there. What does he do?
Yeah.
He
Torches all his plows and equipment, slaughters the oxen, and cooks them over the fire.
12 oxen. Yeah. What does that tell us about Elisha? I've never thought about this until this time when I read this story. What does that tell us about Elisha?
Maybe had some money.
Yeah, right? Yeah. This was no little commitment. He had enough money to have 12 oxen and all that equipment. Yeah, that's he might, he was not your average person when it came to wealth in that area, right? To have acquired that much. And so he gave up probably a pretty considerable estate, if you will, to follow Elijah and to follow God, right? And so he did. It was just probably a pretty considerable loss from a secular sense. You think about this, would be like the disciples torching their boat before they went and followed Jesus, right? That was, and then cutting up their nets. Right? This is how he had made his money. And it's a pretty, so he's saying this is final. There's no, you don't turn back. You don't come back from that one. Yeah, he didn't leave any outs. He was certainly very, very committed to joining this cause. Chapter 20. We've got to be there.
Those were all his oxen. It says he was plowing with 12 yoke, and he was driving the last one.
Mm-hmm.
A yoke is usually pulling a plow. One yoke.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's what I would say. I think some people would be pretty mad if those weren't his oxen,
He only killed his oxen.
No, I think he killed them all. Because I read this part first in my study Bible. And there was a note. He was on the 12th team of oxen, so he could watch the others that were in front of him and make sure they were working. I think the other 11 were working for him.
Mm-hmm. And the implications that I always got, that I get, is that he slaughtered everything. He cut all the ties to, this was his location.
Yep.
And there's no,
go back to now. So.
There's nothing to go back to now. And like I said, I never thought about that before, that he was coming from, he had to be coming from a pretty wealthy family to be able to have that kind of equipment, if you will. All right. We are moving slower than usual, aren't we? I was going to get us so far. You'll have to probably read 21 and 22 on your own. 21 through 6. Can someone read those for me? A little bit lengthier, but I don't think there's too many bad names in there. 1 through 6.
Now Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, mustered his entire army. Accompanied by 32 kings with their horses and chariots, he went up and besieged Samaria and attacked it. He sent messengers into the city to Ahab, king of Israel, saying, "This is what Ben-Hadad says, your silver and gold are mine, and the best of your wives and children are mine." The king of Israel answered, "Just as you say, my lord the king, I and all I have are yours." The messengers came again and said, "This is what Ben-Hadad says. I sent to demand your silver and gold, your wives and your children. But about this time tomorrow I'm going to send my officials to search your palace and the houses of your officials. They will seize everything you value and carry it away." Further.
That's perfect right there, actually. All right. So kind of a story shift here, but we've got a couple different kings interacting with each other. We got Ben-Hadad, and we've got Ahab, wicked King Ahab. And Ben-Hadad says he's coming with his entire army to take over Israel and take everything from Ahab that has any kind of value at all, right?
Was he a king of some other country then?
Yep.
Ben-Hadad?
Yep. We might say he was king of Syria.
Of Syria?
Yep. Okay. Any indication that this force might be a pretty big force that Ahab is dealing with?
Well, it said he had 32 kings.
All right. Yeah.
So, and they each had their own army.
And even if 32 kings means, 32 kind of like tribal chiefs or something like that, that's still going to be a pretty considerable army to deal with. And how does Ahab respond to this threat?
He says, take everything. I'm scared to death.
What do you think of that reaction?
As mighty as he thought he was, he's losing it now, the
Potentially,
power.
yeah. He gives in pretty quick.
Yeah.
And
Where's old Jezebel?
Yeah.
What's she saying about this?
And maybe he thought, I'm in no position to negotiate here, right? What did Israel just gone through? 3.5 year drought, right? So maybe they're not in the best position, financially and fitness wise to deal with a force that's coming in, right? And he says he's going to surrender unconditionally, essentially, to Ben-Hadad. He thought, I'm in no position, I'm in no spot to be able to resist a king this powerful. What do you think about that thought line? I'm in no position to resist a king this powerful. Do you agree with him? And it looks pretty bleak, right?
Yeah.
Is he in position to deal with a powerful king?
Into the end of his reign.
I think his things are about to end here. Huh? What is he forgetting?
Right?
Yeah.
Warren.
Oh man. Yeah. He can't recall back just a little bit ago. I think I saw something on Mount Carmel. Yeah. I think there might be someone out here that could but he says, he's dismayed and he says, take it all, take anything of value, right? And that's pretty reasonable, to give in that quickly. If you really do think, there's nothing I could possibly do. This is the only way I'm going to get out alive. There's no point in putting up a fight. But Ahab certainly, once again, showing that he has no faith. No faith. 7 through 9. It says, the king of Israel summoned all the elders of the land and said to them, see how this man is looking for trouble? When he sent for my wives and my children, my silver and my gold, I did not refuse him. The elders and the people answered, don't listen to him or agree to his demands. So he replied to Ben-Hadad's messenger, tell my lord the king, your servant will do all you demand the first time, but this demand I cannot meet. They left and took the answer back to Ben-Hadad. And so, right, Ben-Hadad originally said, I'm going to just take your silver and gold and your wives and the women of Israel, right?
Well,
And
he said your best wives.
Yeah.
And children. I think I'd have just sent him the poor ones.
No, that's thinking, huh? What was the additional demand that Ben-Hadad made?
When he come back, he wanted everything.
Said, all right, well, if you're going to give into that.
Yeah, if you're going to give in that, I'll take it all. And he was going to even search their houses.
Right.
In the temple.
Sometimes we call this the foot in the door effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. A nice psychology principle here. You ask someone for something small, and then they're more likely to do something big than if you directly came and asked them to do something big. Yeah. And it's a real thing in sales, right? People do this all the time in sales. They use the foot in the door effect, and they get you on the hook with something small, and then they're really, what they really want to do is push a bigger product, but they can't do that. They can't go directly to it because it doesn't work as well. And then the other way this works, and this is called, I'm getting into psychology now, not foot in the door, but it's called the door in the face effect. And that's where you ask them for something big, and then you say, okay, well, I'm just going to do the small thing instead, knowing that they're going to say no to the big thing. But okay, well, I guess, you made it all the way out here. I can buy this little product off of you. And that's really, you were just trying to sell the little product. But anyways, hopefully I can connect this back to the lesson here. We've got a foot in the door effect of sorts here with Ahab, or with Ben-Hadad, and that he asked for, it's still a pretty significant demand, right? But he said, well, if you're going to give me that, I might as well just take it all. You didn't seem to put up much of a fight here. And so the elders of Israel say to Ahab, don't give in to everything, right? And there's some wisdom here, right? There's no point in giving up everything, without a fight, because you're giving up everything, right? They're probably not going to leave you alive if they think they're going to be this easy of a pushover. And so Ahab kind of says, okay, well, that makes sense. So I'm just going to refuse that last part. I'm not going to give him everything of my wealth, and maybe he'll be happy with that. But what do you think? How would Ben-Hadad react to this? A tyrant probably wouldn't be too excited to be refused even on one point. Yeah, and so I would suppose that he's not going to respond too well to that. 10 through 12. Can someone read that for me? 10 through 12.
Then Ben-Hadad sent another messenger to Ahab. May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if enough dust remains in Samaria to give each of my men a handful. The king of Israel answered, tell him, one who puts on his armor should not boast like one who takes it off. Ben-Hadad heard this message while he and the kings were drinking in their tents, and he ordered his men, prepare to attack. So they prepared to attack the city.
All right. So Ben-Hadad gets the message from Ahab. And Ahab, I feel like we've heard this line somewhere before, right? May the gods deal with me. Yeah. Right? Jezebel said that line just a chapter ago. And so kind of a repeat of it, right? Except, she said it to Elijah.
Yeah.
And his reply, beyond that, he says to tell Ben-Hadad, what one who puts on his armor should not boast like one who takes it off. What does that mean?
Don't count your chickens before.
Yeah. Why didn't they just say that? And simpler. I'll be honest. It took me a few seconds of thinking through that statement to say, what does that mean? Yeah. Right. The idea is that you don't want to boast, do your boasting before battle. You want to do your boasting after battle, right? Or maybe let your battling do the talking, if you will, right? We see this a lot in sports, right? People that are humbled, that they do all kinds of boasting before the event occurs. They guarantee a win or whatever it is, and then afterwards, probably shouldn't have guaranteed that. You see it every year. I just saw one in the news today. Yes, in college football, some guy guaranteeing that they were going to beat the number one team in the country. Well, good luck with that. It's the Twins boasting. That's just their fans. It's
Just the fans.
yeah. All right. So they get ready. They're going to attack here, and I hope that the heading of that section doesn't give away too much there. But Ahab may be the winner here. Can someone read verses 13 through 15 for me?
Meanwhile, a prophet came to Ahab, king of Israel, and announced, this is what the Lord says. Do you see in this vast army? I will give it into your hand today, and then you will know that I am the Lord. But who will do this? Asked Ahab. The prophet replied, this is what the Lord says. The young officers of the provincial commanders will do it. And who will start the battle? He asked. The prophet answered, you will. So Ahab summoned along the young officers of the provincial command, 232 men. Then he assembled the rest of the Israelites, 7,000 in all.
Okay. Not a large military force here. Not a large military force. So we get this nameless prophet that comes onto the scene. And some people have said, well, this has got to be Elisha or Elijah. But remember, there were 7,000 other people that remained faithful. And this prophet tells Ahab, here's what's going to happen. That God is going to deliver the Syrians or whatever we want to call them into your hand. Where do you see God's grace in this passage?
Showing himself again.
Right? Nothing Ahab has done so far has deserved this at all, right?
Yeah.
Or he's getting another chance and another chance, right? Yes, a lot of people say, oh yeah, the Old Testament, it's all about God's law and justice, yeah. It is, but there's certainly this reeks of God's grace here. Ahab doesn't deserve this at all. He doesn't deserve another chance. And he's lived this life of just idolatry, right? And says he was the most wicked king there was, and still God is giving him another chance here to see what does it say? What does this God say the result will be? Deliverance. So certainly the Syrians are going to end up on the losing side. God versus anybody, you're going to be on the losing side if you're the anybody. But what is Ahab going to get out of all of this?
You will know that he's the Lord.
Yeah. Right? He says you're going to know that I am the Lord. And I'm going to use the word irony again here, and I don't know if I'm using it correctly, but there might be a little bit of irony in the fact that Ahab probably should know that Yahweh is the Lord at this point, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Boy, you'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you're like, okay, now I'm convinced. Yeah, that thing that happened on Mount Carmel, that wasn't convincing enough. But if you can take care of this for me, now I'm convinced. And the sad part is maybe he does know that he's the Lord, but he certainly doesn't have any faith in him, because if we continued on, which we're probably not gonna get to, chapter 21 is not Ahab's best moment. And if you flipped ahead, I bet you might even see a title where Ahab doesn't quite make it through the section. And Ahab is going to be the one, right? It says he's going to be the one to really take care. He's going to start the battle himself. So God is going to use Ahab. Verses, let's see, how about 16 through 21? 16 through 21. Someone read that for me.
They set out at noon, while Ben-Hadad and the 32 kings allied with him were in their tents getting drunk. The young officers of the provincial commanders went out first. Now Ben-Hadad had dispatched scouts who reported, "Men are advancing from Samaria." He said, "If they have come out for peace, take them alive. If they have come out for war, take them alive." The young officers of the provincial commanders marched out of the city with the army behind them, and each one struck down his opponent. At that, the Arameans fled, with the Israelites in pursuit. But Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, escaped on horseback with some of his horsemen. The king of Israel advanced and overpowered the horses and chariots and inflicted heavy losses on the Arameans.
All right. Didn't see that coming, right? They would defeat this mighty force. And of course, the timing was perfect too, right? Because what's going on with the leadership? Right? What do you think about that command that Ben-Hadad gave? What does he say? In verse 18 there.
Yeah, what does that mean?
If they have come out, what's this?
Take them alive.
If they come out.
Didn't he say take them alive, and what was the other thing he said?
If they come out for war, take them alive.
Yeah.
Either way.
You're gonna make them
Either
slaves.
way.
Yeah.
Maybe. I actually liked what one comment. This is a very confusing direction. It's a very odd direction for that time. Why might Ben-Hadad have given an odd direction?
I mean, it's totally opposite. If you come for war or peace, take them both alive.
Huh?
You know,
It doesn't make any sense in the scheme of this story and in the scheme of behavior during this time period. Why might he have given an odd command? Don't think too hard now. What is something that you do that can make your judgment waver?
Fear.
You are drink.
He was drunk,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
It's we don't ever necessarily, you don't get, the how he said it, but when I read this story, and this is what some of the commentators said, not all of them, but you can almost imagine him slurring his words as he's saying, "Yeah, take them alive," right? And it's just, yeah, it's just not. It's almost nonsense, right? And so their leadership is all out of sorts here. They were certainly must have been pretty confident. They were already maybe toasting their victory, and it does not go well for them, as we knew it would. 22 through 25 says, afterward, the prophet, right, our nameless prophet, came to the king of Israel, Ahab, and said, strengthen your position and see what must be done, because next spring the king of Aram will attack you again. Meanwhile, the officials of the king of Aram advised him, their gods are gods of the hills. That is why they were too strong for us. But if we fight them on the plains, surely we will be stronger than they. Do this, remove all the kings from their commands and replace them with other officers. You must also raise an army like the one you lost, horse for horse and chariot for chariot, so we can fight Israel on the plains. Then surely we'll be stronger than they. He agreed with them and acted accordingly, right? All right. So, their gods are the gods of what?
The hills.
What a strange thought here. And this is pretty consistent with this time period. Most people didn't think of God in terms of of a God that operate over anything, like monotheistic, we might call it, right? One God. Most people would have thought, there's the God of the hills and the God of the plains and the God of this and the God of that. And so they thought, well, man, we made a mistake, Their God is the God of the hills. And we tried to battle them in the hills, and of course we would lose. So we need to get out of the hills and into the plains, right?
Kind of reminds me of Vietnam, the jungle fighting, and Americans weren't used to that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Just small training before they got there, but I mean, it was like the same thing.
Yeah, I suppose it could have been they weren't used to the elements, right?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
But in this case, they didn't necessarily blame the elements themselves. They blamed the gods of that element, right? The kind of a strange thought, but that's the way a lot of people operated back then. The idea of a deity was more of a local deity. He was God of this territory, and we try to take it not to them on their territory. So now we're going to take it to them on the plane here, and they're about to find out God is a God. God is God everywhere. Right?
Are the Armenians? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Is that a country too then?
It's in modern day Syria.
Okay.
And some versions even refer to them as the Syrians.
Okay. I mean, they mentioned so many kings and different things.
And what's amazing is you think about where all this took place, and then you look at the map and this little tiny bit with all these different kings here. Yeah, it can be really tough to keep track of everything. I'm glad there wasn't too many questions about specific kings on my entrance exam or any of the questions you asked me either. I probably wouldn't have made it into the program if you were the test maker.
Oh, I think he was done.
All right. So God is the God everywhere. We're going to get through this little section here. 26 through 28. Can someone read that for me? Whoever wants it. Someone's got to do it.
The next spring, Ben-Hadad mustered the Armenians and went up to Aphek to fight against Israel. When the Israelites were also mustered and given provisions, they marched out to meet them. The Israelites camped opposite them like two small flocks of goats, while the Armenians covered the countryside. The man of God came up and told the king of Israel, "This is what the Lord says. Because the Armenians think the Lord is a God of the hills and not a God of the valleys, I will deliver this vast army into your hands, and you will know that I am the Lord."
All right. So maybe I would suppose God took it as an insult, that they limited his power, and so certainly he's going to deliver this vast army into the hands of the Israelites. How do we know they're vast? What's the comparison we get there? Did anyone catch that?
Yeah, they were like two flocks on each side of them.
Yeah.
The other one covered the whole valley.
Two small flocks of goats versus, if you're looking at it from afar, you'd say, oh, the Israelites are in pretty big trouble here. Yeah?
And you go ahead a little bit, it's 100,000 casualties.
Oh, don't spoil it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I take that back.
No. It's cat's out of the bag. Israel wins this battle, right? And we get some numerical evidence of God's dominance in this battle too. Why don't you read that for us, right? 29 and 30.
My glasses.
No, all right. Well, I'll read it. It says, for 7 days they camped opposite each other, and on the seventh day the battle was joined. The Israelites inflicted, here it is, 100,000 casualties on the Armenian foot soldiers in 1 day. The rest of them escaped to the city of Aphek, where the wall collapsed on 27,000 of them. And Ben-Hadad fled to the city and hid in an inner room. All right.
Well, this is such a small area, and you take all those casualties, boy, that would cover everything pretty near, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thousands and thousands of dead bodies.
That was just on the foot soldiers.
Yeah.
And then the wall collapsed on
Mm-hmm. And the implication there is that not too many of them made it either.
Yep.
Right? Certainly proving that God is God, right?
And there's a lot of things that, you got to have the faith of a child when you read. A lot of this we don't understand, or I don't. Maybe other people do, but of all the bodies, for example. And what do they do with them and stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When we toured Gettysburg and this one battlefield, they said the people controlling it, they changed hands, I think 4 or 5 times that day. And they found notes one guy wrote, he said, in the morning the wheat was standing. By the end of the day, he said, I could walk across the field and not touch the ground. This must have been just like that. It must have just
Good bodies all over.
Body next to body next to body. They're probably even piled up, I think. Wow, what a sight.
Mm-hmm.
Oof.
Yeah. And you think about the Civil War is a pretty good example of Gettysburg or Antietam, where they're just vast amounts of people would die in 1 day. Yeah.
I have a friend that was in Korea, and he said the same thing when the Chinese came in there.
Okay.
They just ran over the wire fences and everything.
The gun barrels got so hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't want this study to turn too dark here, but
It's getting pretty dark.
it is. But the implication, it is pretty dark, because despite seeing this, we can go on in just a little bit into the next book, and we're going to see that it made little to no impact on the Israelites. They didn't remain faithful for very long. And we might as well finish out the chapter to say we got through it here. 31 through 34 says, well, we're not going to finish the chapter, are we?
Can we finish where old Ahab dies?
Now you want to skip to this? Just skip to that.
Yeah, I want to see
Ahab dies.
Oh, you want to go to his funeral?
Well, Ahab dies and Jezebel dies. Yes, it happens pretty quick here. And I would suggest, if you guys have the time, because we don't today, but to read chapter 21, because it's an interesting little story here over just a simple land dispute that causes Ahab and Jezebel to kind of lose it. And they end up making sure this guy, they kind of conspired to kill this guy, and then they take over his vineyard, and then this is their one last great sin that causes them to be condemned by God. So if you have time, make sure to finish up 1 Kings. 1 Kings is a dark book at a lot of times, but you still see God remaining faithful to a people that just don't deserve it at all.
And dogs will eat Jezebel when she dies. Devour her.
Any final thoughts on 1 Kings? Anyone gonna read the sequel when they get home? 2 Kings. Also a light read. Yeah, things don't go much better in 2 Kings. In fact, you could probably say they go worse in 2 Kings than 1 Kings.
Is that just a follow-up? More kings then?
Yep.
Second
And in
Kings.
fact, when the books were first, the canon was first put together, the biblical canon, before even some of the more modern people that put together, like the Greek Bible and whatnot, they called it 1st and 2nd Samuel were called 1st and 2nd Kings, and 1st and 2nd Kings were called 3rd and 4th Kings at one point in biblical history. And so it's all very related. I mean, yeah, 1st and 2nd Samuel, it's the story of Samuel, and then the story of the first king, Saul, and then David. As we get into 2nd Samuel, he dominates 2nd Samuel, and then so I mean, really, it's just all the same story.
Who are the main prophets as we go ahead now? I mean Elisha.
Yeah.
Isaiah.
Some other names.
So you're gonna get Isaiah on the scene, and
Isaiah is one.
right, and then even Jeremiah is gonna come onto the scene after Isaiah, and then a lot of the minor prophets. Now, not all of these people are in 2 Kings.
Yeah.
I mean, but in that timeline, you're gonna get their stories are gonna show up. And then, of course, 2 Kings ends with the exile from, it's all over by the end of 2 Kings for Israel. And then it'll never really be quite the same for them again. Obviously, they never have the same 12 tribes operating in union together. But yeah, kind of my takeaway that I hope you guys got from this book is watching God remain faithful even through some pretty bad people, and remaining faithful to his children.
And he'll give you a chance too, no matter what you did. Like
Ahab did not deserve a second chance, right? Or the third, or the fourth, or the fifth, or the sixth, or the seventh, and eventually Ahab's luck ran out, right? But let's close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you for remaining faithful to this class.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Great job again.
By the way,